We have found out that his campaign
And we're going
leader
live to question period right now. We're
is
just
a
a
main
couple of
lobbyist for
seconds
Loblaws.
over. Thank you for
This is
watching. I'll
what's
be with
going
you in a minute.
on behind
We are
closed
right
doors within
in
the
the
Conservative Party.
first question from Pierre Poilievre.
What did he promise his campaign leader? That's my question. The Honourable Opposition Leader. Well, to axe the tax. That's what I promised. We are also going to fix car theft problems. I announced a common sense plan today to put an end to sentences being served at home and also to put an end to automatically releasing car thieves on bail. 3 car thefts should lead to 3 years behind bars. Will the government stop the crime that it has caused? We have a common sense plan. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader likes to talk about clarity and common sense. So here's some questions for him. What did his campaign leader advise him regarding grocery prices and costs in Canada? And what did he promise her? Because his political career is all thanks to this person. So what did he promise her? She speaks to his party's caucus behind closed doors. What is she advising all of these Conservatives about the cost of living and about grocery prices in Canada? It's so hypocritical, Mr. Speaker.
What I promised was to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. The Prime Minister, with the support of the NDP, passed catch and release that allows career car thieves to be released the same day they are caught stealing cars, to have house arrest, and to have shorter sentences, many of which they serve in their living room watching Netflix. That has led to a 100% increase in car theft in Montreal and Ottawa, and a 300% increase in Toronto. Will they reverse these disastrous and reckless policies so that we can stop the crime?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, of course, this government has a comprehensive plan on auto theft. It's interesting, though, the leader this week is pretending to care about food prices and about competition in the grocery sector. This week he's pretending to care about auto theft, Mr. Speaker, but we find out that his campaign manager, the woman to whom he owes the leadership of this party, is addressing he and his caucus and advising them on food prices. What is her advice, and what does he owe his campaign manager?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yeah, the advice is to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost and not worth the crime. We now are paying $1 billion more in insurance premiums because he has led to a quadrupling of car thefts in Toronto. I have a common sense plan, which I rolled out today, to end house arrest and catch and release for career criminals and bring in 3 years of jail for 3 stolen cars. Will this government accept the common sense plan?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
I'm very happy that the Leader of the Opposition, after reading a government press release, has finally tuned into this issue. But a couple of clarifications. Mandatory minimums for auto theft for repeat offences already exist in the criminal code. So you're not changing something that already exists. Secondly, as an aggravating factor for an auto theft that occurs with organized crime, that's already on the books too. 718.2 of the criminal code, Mr. Leader of the Opposition. Why don't we focus on things we can actually do, like getting tough with organized crime and anti-money laundering?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Opposed to mandatory minimums for car auto theft. And furthermore, the minister claimed that he brought in bail reform that would stop auto theft, only that their bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. So he's got to read his own law before trumpeting it in the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, they've given us a 300% increase in auto theft in Toronto, a 300% increase in auto claims this year alone. That is their record. We have a common sense plan to stop the crime. Why won't they implement it today?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition purports to be tough on crime. You know who I listen to about crime measures? Police officers. You know what they tell me, Mr. Speaker? They tell me that this isn't an individual crime. This is backed by people who are organized criminals. How do we deal with that? We get tough on money laundering. When he's asking me to read the law, I'd ask him to read C-59. That has measures that deal with money laundering that you're voting against.
Before we continue with question period, for the second time, I'd like to remind members that all comments go through the chair. I remind the Honourable Minister that all members come through the chair as opposed to directly to another member of Parliament. L'honorable député de La Prairie.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to asylum seekers, the Liberals are mocking Quebecers. The $470 million they've owed Quebecers since 2021 has not been repaid. What's more, this Liberal government is going to give Toronto...
Anyway, welcome back, everybody. We've just been watching the exchange. Wanted to let you all know. I was just going to break in here for a second, as long as the blockheads are up. And to let you know, we've got these great t-shirts, $35. This is the second anniversary Freedom Convoy t-shirt. These are our design. And this is Chris Barber's truck, Big Red. Now, if you've been following the Freedom Convoy, and especially the trials, Chris Barber, along with Tamara Leach, are the ones being charged with mischief. Now, I know Chris fairly well from the trial, and we've sent him one of these shirts, and he's going to be putting it on for us. But $35 for t-shirts. We include this one, the Resolve to Resist t-shirt, and Think While It's Still Legal. They're all $35. And we have hoodies available for $45. But you can see more in the description and look under the store. But I just wanted to mention that to you while the blockheads were up here. And we'll get back to QP here. The only thing Mark Holland's working towards is to have more Canadians commit suicide. This guy is an absolute imbecile. He's proud of his medical assistance and dying program. He's proud that Canada has become the suicide capital of the world. This guy, I remember him when he first came to the House during the opposition days of the Liberal, when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. He was a piece of political baggage in those days, absolutely worthless in terms of his input, and he still is. But of course, so's Jagmeet Singh. I mean, look at this guy. Gets up there and he makes his little points while he props up the Trudeau government faithfully every day. It's such a farce. I have to wonder if the guy owns another suit, too. I mean, he should own quite a few because he's a wealthy man. Never really had to rub shoulders with any blue-collar people in his life.
It is absolutely
sorry, turn it
essential
on
that
again.
we bring down the cost of living, and we need to improve affordability. That is why we worked with all provinces and territories to buy
Sorry, folks, I had it
medication
muted there. But back
for
on
bulk
again.
purchasing to bring down costs. Now, as for lobbying, that's a question for Jenny Burns, I'd say, Mr. Speaker.
From Calgary,
Oh, they really latched
This
onto that
NDP
Jenny
government
Burns thing,
continues
haven't
to
they?
scam Canadians with their carbon tax. They said it would reduce emissions. It didn't. They said Canadians would get more in these phony rebates, and they don't. And they plan to increase this carbon tax scam in April, making the cost of everything go up. As 2 million Canadians visit a food bank in a single month, a third of which are children. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Liberals stop their plans to increase the carbon tax scam on April the 1st, making the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating even more expensive?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I find it incredulous that the opposition is speaking about scams. When you think about the advice that they are giving Canadians to invest in volatile cryptocurrency.
When's
to
the last
fire
time they
governor
told
of the Bank
anybody
of
to
Canada,
invest
one
in
of Canada's foremost institutions. And
God,
to
they're
vouch
tired talking
not
points.
once, not twice, but 120
Tired cabinet
times
ministers,
against
tired
supports
talking
for
points.
Canadians, including our armed forces and including Ukraine. That's the height of hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to vote against all measures that makes Canadians' lives even harder and even more expensive every single time. Conservatives are on the side of Canadians who are having to go into food banks more than ever before and making the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating more expensive because of their carbon tax scam. This Liberal NDP government is immune to the pain that they're causing on Canadians because they're always working for the Liberal insiders and consultants. Why don't they scrap the scam and axe a tax to bring down the cost of gas, groceries, and home heating already?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, after the news this weekend about insiders, I find it rich coming from the opposition that they're going to criticize that point. But I will ask them in return, what is it that they would cut? Are they going to cut supports to Ukraine and the Canadian Armed Forces? Are they
I
going
hope
to
so.
cut affordable
No, they
housing,
won't
Mr. Speaker?
actually.
Are they going to cut the Canada
False
Child
alarm,
benefits
Anita.
and $10 a day childcare?
No, the
Let's hear it.
Conservatives
What are
want
they
to give
gonna
more
cut?
to Ukraine, unfortunately. They want to give away all our rockets, too. I saw a
I'd like to
report
hear
about
the
that
question from
today.
the Honourable Member from Foothills.
Well, I'm very proud to say the first thing we'll cut is the Liberal NDP carbon tax. To make life more affordable for Canadians. Because Canadians are paying more for food than they ever have before, with 2 million people relying on a food bank every month. The Prime Minister's solution, let's make food even more expensive. On April 1st, they plan to increase the carbon tax by 23%. Part of their plan to quadruple the carbon tax. Conservatives have a common sense bill, C-234, which will remove the carbon tax for farmers, making food more affordable for Canadians. Why will the Prime Minister not cancel his plan to increase the carbon tax on April 1st to ensure Canadians can feed their family?
This is going to be
Honourable Government
devastating
House Leader.
on April
Mr.
1st
Speaker,
when
it's rich coming
they
from
raise
this
this carbon
opposition
tax.
talking about food
Well,
prices.
is that
when
the
we
word
know
of the
that
day,
that
Steve?
member's campaign
Rich?
chair, campaign manager,
Like
senior
liberals?
advisor, the person that walks into their caucus every week and gives them advice is the chief lobbyist for Loblaws in this country, Canada's leading food retailer. Mr. Speaker, instead of
Well,
talking
Jenny
about
Byrne
axe the
finally
tax,
came
maybe
back
they
to
should
haunt the
axe
Conservatives.
axe.
I'd said it would happen sooner or later. But
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
I know
From the
who
Liberals
she is
incredible as they continue to
very
avoid the real
well.
question. Canadian farmers should be applauded for their environmental accomplishments instead of being punished by the carbon taxes from this Liberals.
Jenny Byrne
To produce a ton of canola in Saskatchewan is 67% lower
should never have
than
been
the carbon
associated with
footprint of
Polyev
European
or his
wheat.
campaign.
You can transport
Might be a
wheat,
good
Canadian
excuse to
wheat,
get rid of
3.5
her.
times
I
around
hope
the
they
world
do.
before it has the same global footprint of wheat grown in Europe. But the
Political
Prime Minister
baggage,
wants to
that's
punish
all she is.
farmers instead of rewarding them for their environmental stewardship. Why won't the Prime Minister cancel his carbon tax increase on farmers to make sure that we can grow food for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've heard today Alberta MPs talking about vulnerable.
Oh,
yet the
no,
leader of the
not
Conservative
cue ball.
Party claims to talk about freedom, but now he's showing every Canadian exactly the type of leader he is. He is showing Canadians what type of person he is. He is the one standing with the bullies. He is the one who's picking up.
Yeah, you hear Randy claims he was up all night consoling trans youth in Alberta. What the hell is the cabinet minister doing up talking to trans youth all night? And if he was,
for Workforce Development.
Mr. Speaker, he is the one who's standing with the bullies. He is the one who is picking on vulnerable people, standing with Danielle Smith instead of defending the most vulnerable youth in our country. Mr. Speaker,
oh, and you were up all night consoling them, were you?
Canadians will not forget.
Yeah, I really think this guy was on the phone all night. What
Today,
a joke.
The costly Bloc Liberal coalition will have the opportunity to vote on a Conservative motion to cancel the April 1st carbon tax increase. 800,000 Quebecers are lining up at food banks every month. Meanwhile, the Bloc and the Liberals think that it's a good time and a good idea to raise taxes. What's worse, Bloc MPs want to radically increase the carbon tax, which has a direct impact on the cost of groceries in Quebec. Who will have the courage to vote against Bloc Liberal ideology this afternoon? Who will let more families keep more money in their pockets, and who will decrease food bank use? The Honourable Environment and Climate Change Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to remind my honourable colleague that federal carbon pricing does not apply to Quebec because they have had a cap and trade system for over 10 years. That is Quebec's government's system. So he can talk to François Legault, Quebec's premier, about this if he wants to. I'll give him his contact information. But let's talk about what we've done. We support sustainable agriculture. They voted against it. They voted against
they don't support agriculture
to help
sustainable or not. They support famine
and poultry producers who
this clown is supporting famine in Canada
Speaker.
With extremist environmental policies that are catastrophic.
What the Liberals are trying to do is distract us, divide us, to make us forget their disastrous track record, which has resulted in 2 million people using food banks every month.
Give the land back to farmers so they can farm it without government interference.
2 million Canadians
especially
are using
environmental
every month because
crap
they can no
interference coming from
groceries, Mr.
Who's
Speaker.
crazy?
Who will do the right thing this afternoon? The right thing.
Guilbeault wants to sell electric cars. That's really what he should be doing for a living. Fire the ass. Get him out of the House of Commons. Get him out of the cabinet and have him go sell electric cars someplace. That's clearly what he has a gift for. Although it's a losing proposition because these things are not going to replace
a party that wants to maybe form government still doesn't understand that climate change is real. In fact, last year, there was a 20% decrease in grain production due to drought. And drought in 2023 dropped grain production by 13%, Mr. Speaker. And over the course of the past decade, 200,000 farmers in Canada have experienced higher costs due to climate change.
Imbecile.
Why do the Conservatives want to let people pollute for free, Mr. Speaker?
Just like all those fires are a result of climate change, Not the arsons. Not the arsonists, no.
All members to
all
wait their
climate
turn
change.
before asking
These
their
people
question.
are just have nothing inside of their heads.
41% increase in business bankruptcies last year, and 61% of those bankruptcies were in Quebec. Mr. Speaker, that is the
really
got
to get rid of the Bloc someday because they have no business being there. I say that all the
for
time.
small and medium enterprises to repay the emergency account without penalty.
Any separatist party has no business sitting in a federal House of Commons.
That insolvency cases have been on the rise for the past month, and it's obvious that the Liberals have just added $20,000 worth of debt to at-risk
your money
SMEs. Why not be more
run back
flexible
to
with
their
these businesses rather than trying to kill them off?
separatism. I've never had the time of day for the Bloc.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada Emergency Business Account was created to keep businesses afloat throughout the pandemic and to allow them to get back on their feet.
Dear.
Over 80% of businesses have repaid their CEBA loans, and thus they get some loan forgiveness. We are also helping businesses with credit card loans so that they can keep more businesses and more money. The honourable member for Beauport-Limoilou. Well, the Liberals brag that 80% of SMEs paid back their emergency account on time, but that's not good news because it means that 20% of SMEs are at risk of bankruptcy. These aren't multinationals we're talking about. These are small shops and restaurants in our neighborhoods. In order to help them, the government needs to do three things. One, study their cases on a case-by-case basis. Two, guarantee loans from financial institutions. And three, reinstate the $20,000 subsidy. What is so hard about showing our local businesses a bit of flexibility? The Honourable Regional Development Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague for the question. I would like to remind my colleague that that wasn't the first extension of the deadline, it was the second. We offered 2 extensions to businesses, and businesses were supported by the government, but if they cannot repay it, we will guarantee it for 3 years at an interest rate of 5%, which is $250 a month in repayment payments. Also, in Canada, we are looking to the future. I've just made announcements in Drummondville, in Sherbrooke, and in many regions in Quebec. We will continue to support businesses, and we will help them with what they need. The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Last week, I talked to a restaurant owner in Trois-Rivières. When he applied for the emergency account a few years ago, he couldn't have predicted that food inflation would increase by 10% every year. He couldn't have predicted that patronage would decline this much. Ahead of the January 18th deadline, he asked his bank for a loan to repay the federal government. The bank said no, because of the uncertainty in the restaurant businesses. Banks, they don't want the risk that the federal government would have to assume. So when he couldn't pay, the federal government demanded another $20,000. How many restaurants, just like his restaurant, do the Liberals intend to close? The Honourable Tourism and Regional Development Minister. Mr. Speaker, if the government hadn't been there to support these businesses would not have made it through the most significant pandemic this country has ever experienced. Now we need to look toward the future, Mr. Speaker. We need to support businesses deal with the challenges of the future. For example, the energy transition, Mr. Speaker, and also improved productivity to deal with labor shortages. On this side of the House, we will continue to support all businesses.
The honourable member from Lloydminster, Battleford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is costing Canadians more than they can afford. His punishing carbon tax is already driving up the cost of groceries, heating, and gas. And on April 1st, this NDP Liberal government wants to increase it once again. Conservatives introduced a common sense motion to cancel the planned carbon tax hike that will cost them even more on gas, groceries, and home heating. Will the Liberals support our common sense Conservative motion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax hike?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources.
Oh, this is one of the worst.
We hear misleading rhetoric from the other side of the House.
It's always misleading rhetoric.
80% of Canadian families get
Here
more
we go.
money back than they pay. It is an affordability measure as well as something that actually addresses the climate crisis in front of us.
Does nothing to address any climate crisis. Does nothing for the environment.
In fact, what he wants to do is take away the rebate. He wants to take away from poor and modest income people money that actually help to pay for groceries, that help to pay for rent, that help to pay for transportation. Shame on you for trying to
It might buy a
those
case of
folks
beer,
and
actually.
benefit only the wealthy in Canada.
You can't handle the truth.
I know that there are many things I must regret. I'm hoping that this is not one of them. So I'd invite ministers to please make sure that the answers are directed through the chair. The honourable member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, that minister can manipulate the facts all day long, but that's not going to change the painful reality that Canadians across this country are experiencing. Let's not forget that the PBO has said that Canadians will still be paying hundreds of dollars in carbon tax even after the rebate. Canadians who are already struggling to afford gas, groceries, and home heating cannot afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax increase. Will the Liberals show some compassion and cancel their April 1st carbon tax increase?
They're following the orders of their masters in the WEF.
Speaker, if Conservatives are truly concerned about the price of
groceries,
I can never
why don't
take
they
this
just
woman
ask their
seriously.
top advisor to pick up the phone and talk to Loblaws, or perhaps the next
Oh,
time
that's
she
the
goes
latest,
to pick
eh?
up her paycheck, she could just ask Loblaws to join
Loblaws.
our work to bring down lower grocery prices, to bring in more competition, and to get rid of predatory practices.
What they
Mr.
should do.
Speaker, if the Conservatives
What would
are
Klaus
truly
Schwab
concerned for
say,
Canadians,
Jennifer?
I know just the person they can have to give their money to Loblaws cost.
The honourable member for votes. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians have had enough of this government's inflationary
What would
policies and
Klaus
excessive
Schwab say?
taxes. The Bloc Québécois 100% fully supports the Liberals when it comes to radically increasing the carbon tax. 2 million Canadians are going to food banks every month. Also, farms are going out of business because the carbon tax is crushing them.
Yeah,
The government
I
is
see
asleep at the
all the
wheel.
comments
They need to
about this
wake up,
rebate.
do the right
It is
thing,
such a
and
joke.
suspend the
It's like
increase
a
scheduled for
pittance,
April
a
1st.
stipend you get back for all the
The Honourable
money you
Government House Leader.
donate against your will
What
to the federal
hypocrisy,
government,
what
the Trudeau government.
hypocrisy coming from that side of the House today, Mr. Speaker. We
Are we
have
going to
found
talk
out
about
that the
Jenny
campaign
again?
manager, maybe that hasn't been translated into French yet for the member across the way, but in fact, the opposition's leader's spiritual leader is the chief lobbyist for the biggest grocery company, and they're trying to give us advice?
The Honourable
Well, somebody's got to give you some advice about Pelly, because you're
the
not
honourable
coming up with
member
any
from,
solutions.
Wellington Halton Hills is an experienced member and a very respected member, and knows full well that he should wait his term before he is able to address the House. The honourable member from Edmonton Griesbach.
Danielle Smith is denying trans kids their basic human rights by denying their access to life-saving health care. It's not the
Yeah,
role
they
of
can't get
politicians to
chemical
tell doctors
castration
how to treat
anymore.
patients. Meanwhile,
No
this leader of
physical
the Conservative
mutilation of
Party
their
remains
bodies. They
shamefully
can't have their
silent
private
on
parts
attacks
ripped
on
off.
trans
That's
rights.
just awful,
The hate
Blake.
and prejudice of some should never override
It's
the
just
fundamental rights
We
of
can't
others.
do this
Will
anymore
this
to these
government
kids.
commit to using the powers of the Canada Health Act to intervene in any denial of
You want these
life-saving
kids to
care
take
for
dangerous
trans youth?
hormones for the rest of their life, to be addicted to big pharma for the rest of their life. That's what you want, Blake, and that's what the Liberals want.
Warm, fuzzy video hiding daggers at my community in Alberta came out last week on social media. I have spent hours on the phone consoling people who are crying on the phone, asking how we can
I
stand
bet
up
you have.
for the
You
rights
lying
of 2
swine.
LGBTQ people in
You've
Alberta.
been on the phone
Mr.
for
Speaker,
hours,
we
have
are
you?
going
Nobody
to
can contact
continue to
you.
work on this,
Nobody,
and
you will
I have
never
one
answer the
message
phone for
Albertans and
anybody.
people across the
But
country.
you've been on the
Legal
phone for
challenges
hours, have you?
notwithstanding, the one way we can stop this is to
You
kill the bill
lying,
before it gets to the
bald-faced
legislature.
liar.
So write to your UCP members, get fired up, mobilize, because kids' rights matter.
I'll get mobilized against you, buddy boy, because you're a lying swine.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
And if you're talking to so-called transgender kids all night long, I wonder what you're up to.
Livable wages. But the Liberals are letting the $10 a day childcare program fail by not giving workers fair pay and benefits, leaving parents without childcare spots. And Conservatives, they want for-profit childcare. This means
So I hate to interrupt the honourable member. Sometimes, colleagues, sometimes we can clearly hear the question and sometimes we can't. This is one of the opportunities where the chair cannot hear the question. I ask all members please to keep your conversations private so I could hear the honourable member. Can the honourable member from Winnipeg Centre start a question again from the
Does anybody out there believe this cue ball Boissonneau is on the phone all night long consoling trans kids all over the province of Alberta? Or do you think he's maybe lying about this? And if he isn't lying about this, what business is it his to be talking to kids across the province? Do you really want this guy to be talking to children?
Higher fees for parents and lower wages for workers. Liberals and Conservatives don't care about care workers. When will the Liberals finally enforce livable wages and benefits for childcare workers so they can live in dignity?
The Honourable
Oh,
Minister
shut your
for
mouth.
Families and Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our
national child care program is making life more affordable for thousands of
Well, as Jenna
Canadian
said,
families,
I'll have a
as
scotch and
is the
soda.
Canada Child Benefit. We continue to work with the provinces and territories to
No, this is-
ensure that the 5-year agreements are upheld, that we do see improvements to wages and benefits for the essential caregivers that we all rely on for the childcare that our kids need. On this side of the House,
Now, just got to insert this. The Liberals and the NDP seem to think there's something noble about castrating children, chemically castrating them, or mutilating their bodies, or getting them addicted to hormones. These people are sick. They are the sick ones. Parents must be informed about this.
300% in Toronto. That's thanks to the catch and release legislation that turns violent offenders loose onto the streets, allowing them to commit more crime. When will they reverse their disastrous policies, put the bad guys in jail so that Canadians can keep their cars?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
I thank the member for her question. I remind her that she represents a part of the Greater Toronto Area, as do I. What I hear from my constituents and people throughout the 905 is that they're concerned about criminality.
Well, this is that
applaud the fact that we
non-entity
took
of an
steps
attorney
to
general.
ensure with bail reform that serious violent repeat offenders are being kept off our streets. The other thing they applaud is when we work hand in hand with the police to keep our communities safe. So when I'm standing with the chief of the Durham Police and a progressive conservative premier and giving them $121 million to help with law enforcement, they're saying that's a step in the right direction and there's more to come.
And before I go to the member of Thornhill's second question, I'd like to apologize to the member for Don Valley East, whose question I skipped by mistake, but it's illogical to go with the second question of the member from Thornhill. The honourable member.
Speaker, I don't know why we have to explain this to the Attorney General, but bail reform doesn't apply to auto theft. It's thanks to their policies that you can get arrested in the morning and go back to committing
You have to
crimes in the
explain a
evening.
lot
and if you
to this
happen
Attorney
to get
General.
sentenced, you can serve the
He's
sentence in the
not
comfort
very
of your
bright.
own home while watching Netflix or even Disney+. That is Canada's justice system after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government. So when will this Liberal government listen to common sense conservative policies, repeal the catch and release, the stay-at-home sentencing, and finally put offenders in jail where they belong?
That's right.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
I very much appreciate the interventions from the member opposite, but if we're going to talk about the criminal code, let's talk about the mandatory minimum that still exists for repeat auto theft offenders under 331.1 sub A. Let's talk about the fact that when you commit an auto theft crime and you're involved with organized criminality, that's already an aggravating factor on sentencing. Oh yes, that was 718.2 sub A sub 4. Please take note. The important piece is that we are bringing together stakeholders, auto industry, every actor that's involved in this system to ensure we tackle this.
Karina Mitchell, I just wrote an article about this for the Post Millennial, who's going through this report from Bonnie Henry. You're dead on. The BC government is insane. Bonnie Henry is absolutely nuts, suggesting that we need more smokable fentanyl on the streets because that makes things safer. These people in BC are totally beyond reason.
The contributions that go back hundreds of years to helping build a beautiful Canada.
Oh,
it's also
here we go.
time for us to remind ourselves that there's still barriers
Nice
that are in
softball
place that we
question.
have to remove. Can the Minister for Diversity, Inclusion, and Persons with Disabilities please tell us more about Black History Month this month?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity.
We don't need a
Inclusion.
Black History Month. We don't need a White History Month. We don't need a Brown History Month. We need more History Month, but history of everybody. Stop getting identity politics into everything.
The country it is today.
These people
It's about
are mad.
recognizing the resilience of Black Canadians in the face of injustice. It's about
Oh, it's
celebrating
all
the fact,
identity
Mr. Speaker,
politics.
that Black
Identity,
history
identity,
is
identity.
Canadian
Division,
history,
division,
and that
division.
government will continue
All
to be
this government
deliberate
wants to do is
about
divide
investing
us from one
directly
another
into Black
on the basis
communities
of
so that we can
everything
continue
they
to
can
build a
come
more
up with,
inclusive and equitable future
especially
for all
race.
Canadians. Happy Black History Month, everyone.
Go ahead.
Chris Fields. Yes, it is sad to drive down Hastings this week. I grew up on the West Coast.
This Prime Minister,
Grew up mostly in Vancouver, but I was in Vancouver all the time. It used to be a clean city, a safe city. Now it's chaos, and it's run by drug addicts. And the people running the province are run by drug addicts.
It's a waste of
BC has gone insane, and their drug policy is killing thousands of people.
Does the Prime Minister recognize that he alone is responsible for the increase in auto theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. The increase in auto theft affects us all and directly concerns us. What we have is that organized crime is connected with this kind of theft. What we have on the table here in the House of Commons is a bill that affects money laundering, C-59, that the Conservatives are voting against. If they are really for fighting car theft, I would invite them to change their decision on this vote. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, what we know at present is this Prime Minister has made Canada number one in terms of exports of stolen cars around the world. This morning, our leader proposed solutions to fix the harm caused by Liberal legislation. Among other things, we will discourage car theft by stopping house arrest and increasing prison sentences for these kinds of criminals. That's common sense, Mr. Speaker. Will the government commit to supporting our efforts to fight auto theft? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, as
they're going to steal your car in another way. The Liberal government wants to steal your car if it's not electric.
Car theft.
They want it off the road by 2025 or 2030.
It is tied to organized crime. This can lead to a higher sentence. It's already said it
they
in the
want to
criminal code. What's
outlaw
not in the criminal code is the fact that we must fight
internal
more to fight organized crime.
Motor
but
by
there
2030.
Is a bill
That's how stupid these people
on the
are.
table in the House of Commons, and the Conservatives will vote
so
against
talk
it.
about car theft. That's the biggest car theft in history.
The Americans are continuing to unfairly attack our softwood lumber industry. Again, last Thursday, the U.S. officially announced a nearly 14% hike in their illegal duties starting next summer. Ottawa must clearly stand up for Quebec forests, but it will take more than just words to get through the crisis. Ottawa must absolutely offer a loan and loan guarantee program to match the unjust amounts being taken by Washington. Will the government take up a proposal to protect our businesses and our workers?
You don't see many of these clowns wearing masks anyway, because they all knew it was a big joke to begin with.
International trade.
Quite interesting. When they're not forced to do it, very few of them will put on their damn mask.
And said that the tariffs against softwood lumber, particularly our very important forestry sector, are unjustified and absolutely unwarranted.
I mean, look at Pablo Homeless Rodriguez
make sure that we are using the dispute settlement mechanism.
No mask for Pablo.
Into this, we will always stand up for Canadian workers, Canadian softwood lumber industry, the forestry sector, and I look forward to working with my honourable colleague to keep doing that. Thank you.
Then I have the
Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The time for talk has passed. It will take loans and loan guarantees to cover these illegal duties. The CUSMA litigation process needs a better framework to prevent these dirty, dilatory tricks. We must call for a tax exemption for private forests, which have nothing to do with these allegations by the U.S. And we have to ensure that Washington recognizes that the Quebec forestry regime is compliant with the free trade regulations. We want to collaborate with the government, but it needs to take action. What is it waiting for? The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
I agree with my honourable colleague. Those tariffs are unwarranted, they're unjust. We need to keep standing up for Canadians, forestry workers, and the sector. I appreciate the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague, and I think what you have seen the government do time and time again.
They always handle the block with thick gloves, because now they need their support.
Where we have helped Canadian forestry companies to expand and to diversify. We need to keep doing this, but I welcome the suggestions coming from my honourable colleague and look forward to working with him. Thanks so much.
Some of the lowest grade individuals in the world.
Cost and the crime
Auto theft is up 300% in Toronto and 100% in Ottawa and Montreal in the last 8 years of his catch and release policies. But his minister says, oh, don't worry. There's already a mandatory jail time provision in 3331A of the Criminal Code. Yes, it's only for 6 months. Today we propose a mandatory 3 years for 3 cars stolen. Will they support this common sense change, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and
Thank the leader opposite for returning to the chamber and returning to this issue. It's an important one, and it's really important to understand the full complexity of the issue. This touches
Well, where's
the
your
auto
goddamn
industry,
leader?
this
Where's the
touches our
Prime
courts,
Minister?
This touches the criminal code.
He never
this touches
returns to the
CBSA.
chamber. He never
What
comes
we know
there,
for Canadians
except
is
once
that
a
under
week.
that party's watch, with that member who was actually a cabinet minister, frontier agencies like the CBSA were actually cut. So in terms of providing the resources to keep Canadians safe, it's an interesting record that they've got. I wouldn't be too proud defending it.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
His main criticism is that when we were in government, we delivered safe streets at a low cost.
Right.
That's right, we spent less. There was less crime and less costs. That's a good thing. With them, you get more costs and more crime. So why won't they follow our common sense plan to bring down costs and crime by keeping repeat car theft criminals in jail now?
And I had to laugh. People are asking, where's Trudeau today? Did you hear last week when he was supposed to be in question period, he was having lunch in Toronto, and the Toronto media was how wonderful it was that Trudeau was blessing people with his wonderful presence.
This week, he
It
pretends
was
to care about
execrable to
auto
read.
theft. He's getting comprehensive answers from the Attorney General, Minister of Justice on what we're doing. He just has empty slogans, and I'll give him some empty slogans. What does this member's campaign manager tell him about food prices? What does she tell him about her lobbying activities with Loblaws? He comes in here shouting slogans like axe the tax. He needs to axe the hacks.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well,
This guy just doesn't have it.
An announcement from the king of lobbying, Hill and Knowlton, which brought on a special national
Hill and
leader
Knowlton.
of
That's
financial
a
communications,
full
who is that member.
deep state. Inside. Corruption.
Over there trying to distract from the fact that
So-
crime is raging out of control. Today I announced a common sense plan to end catch and release and house arrest for repeat car theft criminals. Will they adopt this common sense plan to stop the crime?
The Liberals want Canada to stay in chaos. I haven't seen this guy on his feet so much in months. There's nobody else on the front bench except for he and Guibo.
Order.
I know Wilkinson's there.
Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Oh, shut up, Fergus.
It's pretty clear that the Conservatives are off their game today. What has happened here is that their campaign manager, the woman who has contributed, to whom the leader of the opposition owes his job.
Are we going to go back to Loblaws again?
Exposed as the lead lobbyist.
They're not going to let go of this phone.
Canada's leading food retailer.
They love this one. But confidentially, folks, we're not confidentially. Jenny Byrne is part of the problem.
Order. Colleagues, it's in everyone's interest that the Speaker be able to hear the questions and the answers which are being put forward in the House. I ask members to please restrain themselves so that I can do so. The Honourable Government House Leader has 13 seconds left on the clock.
the leader likes to ask specific questions, so I'll ask him. What's been the advice on food prices given by his campaign manager? How much is she getting paid to do that? And what has he promised her? What does he owe this woman for her lobbying for Loblaws?
The honourable member from Kings Hants.
Over the weekend, Nova Scotia was hit with some of the worst snowfall amounts in
And it was
recent
all
memory.
due to
In
climate
Cape Breton
change. I'm
Regional
waiting for it.
Municipality, over 100 centimeters of snow. The municipality has declared a local state
It was all
of
that global
emergency.
warming in
There are
Nova
over
Scotia.
3,000 people without power, Mr. Speaker. There are communities that have been cut off, and there is a concern about people being able to have access to actually leave their
And
homes. Can
what
the
are you going to
Minister
do, Stephen
for
Guilbeault,
Emergency
about this?
Preparedness update this House on the work that he is doing alongside provincial, municipal, and members of this House to make sure that people are safe in Cape Breton and indeed all across Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister for Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for this question, and in fact, actually thank members of Parliament who kept me updated yesterday.
You
on
almost
this
forget this
significant
guy
snowfall
still has
in
a
Nova
job
Scotia.
over there.
We received a request for assistance from the Nova Scotian government late last night, something which I approved. And I'm happy to report that search and rescue crews have been working all weekend. Snow clearing heavy equipment from Parks Canada have been made available, as well as transportation support from the Coast Guard, and our humanitarian workforce will provide additional support as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
After 8 years, it's clear that well-connected insiders have never had it as good as they do under this NDP Liberal government. The Arrive Scam Watchdog report found a made-for-insiders process for this $54 million spend where qualified companies were cut from contracts if they didn't have the right connections and experience. High-priced insiders got paid every time. This wasn't a bug in the system. It was a feature in a process designed to drive up costs and reward insiders. It's clear that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. The only explanation for this insider protection scheme is incompetence or corruption. So which is it?
Which is it?
Probably both.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
That would make perfect sense.
I have to admit, when I was listening to the
Oh,
member
no.
opposite's question about insiders, collusion, corruption, I thought he was talking about their chief advisor, who is also serving as Loblaws lobbyist. And, Mr. Speaker, isn't it interesting how they are blocking legislation to reduce grocery prices? When it comes to our government's record on issues of ArriveCan, Mr. Speaker, all procurement
You don't have a
policies
record on
must be
ArriveCan,
followed.
except one that's so abysmal. I wouldn't be talking about it, Jenny.
Will come with consequences. Can the members opposite say the same for their own house?
The honourable member from Fort Saskatchewan, Sherwood Park.
Mr. Speaker, that response had absolutely nothing to do with the question.
That's right.
There is a sham investigation. The
Don't
government's
tell me.
investigator admitted that he's not independent. His job depends
They-
on the government's
they didn't
pleasure.
answer your
We have
question?
with the
Darn
Arrive
it.
scam, when whistleblowers criticize the government, they're suspended without pay. When witnesses defend the government, they're protected. It's a $54 million Arrive sham. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost in spending or in corruption. After 8 years, why is this government continuing
TV.
to protect their Arrive scam, Arrive sham
That's
insider
true.
friends?
The
I
Honourable
love it.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said in this House time and time again, we expect all contracts to be issued following the
Or maybe
rules and
clueless,
procedures
too.
set out.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, CBSA is conducting audits, internal investigations. The police are being called in when necessary. And Mr. Speaker, let me be very, very clear.
Let me be
Any
very,
reports
very,
of
very
wrongdoing
clear.
will come with consequences. The ArriveCan app was created at a time to keep Canadians safe, and we expect contracts to be issued following the rules.
Yeah, well, there'll be consequences, all right. They'll get away with it.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this Liberal NDP government wouldn't know accountability if they were hit over the head with it. Today, the Government Operations Committee heard from the Border Services Agency's head of professional integrity. The lesson: this is a kangaroo court for the government to investigate its own department. Mindone, the chief
That's what
information
they're there
officer
for.
during ArriveCan, has been accused of deleting key emails. But the investigator reports to the senior officials at the same department that bought ArriveCan. So will this coalition government hold those in charge accountable, or do they plan to hide the dirt like they usually do?
Yeah, you can hide the dirt so much, then you can't hide it anymore.
Mr. Speaker, we have said time and time again that we support the work that is being done at committee. The minister has instructed the president of CBSA that, she should be very clear and open with the committee on the work that they are doing.
Consequences, Jennifer,
Mr.
I know.
Speaker, they are providing, there is initial interim reports.
You'll
there
get
are more
these people.
investigations happening.
You'll get to
and
the
Mr.
bottom of it,
Speaker,
Jennifer,
once
I know.
Again, we put in place the ArriveCan app to help Canadians during an extraordinary time. And we
it really helps Canadians.
Following all the rules and procurement practices.
No, the honorable member was a joke from the beginning.
Mr. Speaker, this week, every MP in this House will have a chance to vote in solidarity with Ukraine by voting in favor of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement.
Oh, not this crap again.
People are not just fighting for their own security, they're also fighting for our security. And
they're not fighting for anybody's security.
Our government has been unequivocal in our support for Ukraine.
It's going down. Going down to defeat. It's there.
Against Operation Unifier, against military
You
aid,
people are
and they've
so
used
stupid.
their climate change denialism as an excuse to vote against this free trade agreement. Could the Minister of International Trade
There ain't going to be any Zelensky in about 2 more months. He's going to be in Florida. You people are so naive or stupid or both.
Center for his strong advocacy for his constituents and for Ukrainian Canadians. For months, this conservative leader claimed that the Canada,
the most corrupt leader running the most corrupt government in Europe.
Last week in this
and
House,
these liberals love it because they identify with that. They identify with corruption. That's why they love it so much. I can't explain why the conservatives are such cowards on this issue. They want to stop to Ukraine and Zelensky, just like the liberals. I'm going to call them out on it every time they do it because it's unacceptable and it's BS. And we should not be giving billions of dollars to Ukraine because it's all going into the black hole of Kiev.
Mr. Speaker, we've
And
learned
I'm
that
going
the
to say that.
conservative housing strategy is
I don't
to
care what
browbeat
the conservative
so-called
policy is on
municipal
because it's
gatekeepers and
cowardly.
enforce density near transit hubs. Now, neither of these things are relevant for rural Canada. In fact, in Northwest BC, we don't have transit hubs. We barely have public transit. People deserve affordable housing, but what mayors in my region tell me is that they can't build it without infrastructure. And here's where the Liberals come in. Why are communities having to wait so long to hear back about vital infrastructure grants?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The NDP is just so outraged, even though they're propping up this government with
500 applications across the country and 30 deals completed thus far. That will continue, Mr. Speaker. And what do we see as a result of that? Adding to supply, which of course underpins the housing crisis.
The NDP
the housing
should
crisis
go
is
down to
ultimately a
extinction
crisis
for
in
what they're
supply,
doing
and that's
here.
why we're working with municipalities,
But of course,
in particular
so should the
mayors,
Liberals.
which the leader of the opposition continues to denigrate, so that zoning changes can take place in return for federal dollars. That does happen, and more building happens. Duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, mid-rise apartments, all of that is part of that, Mr. Speaker.
You ever wonder if
I'll deal
any
with
of
the
these
member.
people
I'll
are
have the
worth the
question period
cost?
if he wishes to take up the concern.
The Honourable Member from Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all remember 2015 will be the
Oh,
last
not
election
Elizabeth May.
under first past the post. Now, without access to a time
Are
machine,
we
it's simply not
all there
possible
today,
anymore to keep
Elizabeth?
that promise. But this House has an
Are
opportunity
we
to
talking
reach out
coherently
to
today, Elizabeth?
disillusioned
Let's
and
see.
frustrated Canadians who so desperately want fair voting. We have a chance to pass Motion 86 on Wednesday. Will the Prime Minister support this motion that allows
Where is the
a
Prime Minister
citizens'
anyway?
jury,
Having
our
lunch in
fellow
Toronto
citizens,
again,
to
maybe?
help him
Yeah, somebody
find
said maybe
the
he's surfing at the
consensus
casino.
he so desperately
Not quite warm enough there, even with a wetsuit to do that. But
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to
he's fooling around. There's no question about that.
this is a trusted system that Canadians, there must be consensus on. So, Mr. Speaker, while we are working
God, she
with
lives in an
Canadians
alternate
on
universe,
how to
this woman.
ensure that every Canadian has more opportunities to be able to access their right to vote, I know Prop Committee is working hard on recommendations as well if the Conservatives will ever end their filibuster and get down to the real work of this Parliament to ensure that Our democratic institutions are strong, and
democratic
accessibility to vote
institutions.
is also strong.
Yeah, good job, Jennifer.
That so brings the end to
Good.
question period. Comme il est 15 heures.
Well, that was fun. Okay. Anyway, we will thank you very much for watching today. I usually don't do Mondays because the Prime Minister is never there Mondays. I'm not surprised he's not. But it tends to be a little less dramatic on Mondays. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, the prime of the week. But you always get a little bit of liberal idiocy on Mondays as well, so it's worth watching. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and I hope you were able to watch my broadcast yesterday, where I talk about some of the idiocy that went on last week. I was a little late catching up with it because there was a lot going on personally right now, and there's a lot of stuff I needed to get to sooner, and I didn't. But I'm hoping to do more of that this week, as well as continue to watch and monitor question period. As long as we're into the winter and I have to stay at home right now because I'm looking after a very sick animal, and I'm trying to work from home as much as possible. So I'll be doing these live question periods on StreamYard, on YouTube for your benefit, and let's have some fun with it. Let's keep watching and laughing, because one thing Tucker Carlson said is, what the liberals can't stand, what the woke ideologists can't stand, is being laughed at. They can't stand it when you poke fun at them, when you laugh at them, because they are comical. They're dangerous and they're very evil at times, but they are comical. They're so incredibly stupid, and they come out with such inane and such imbecilic and moronic statements that are beyond belief, especially when it comes to how horrible this transgender policy is in Alberta. It's just awful that kids can't be castrated. It's just awful that 12-year-olds can't have sex change operations without telling them, even with telling their parents. Oh my, it's all coming apart. But this is why we do this. Anyway, thanks for watching today. Hope you had as much fun as I did. I'll be back tomorrow, and I'm going to put together another broadcast on how crazy things are in Canada right now. I don't think they've ever been crazier. And it's at a provincial and a federal level in so many places. Thanks again. We'll be back tomorrow. God bless you today.